Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's podcast. And this week's podcast is with my longtime yogi friend, Mark Purser. Mark, welcome to
Hi.
Seva Transformation Academy podcast. Here we talk about energy and life mastery. And you're one of our experts. Now, yes, I'm really grateful that you've come to our channel. And I just want to give an introduction about you, Mark. Mark Purser is the founder of Bamboo Yoga School. Some of you might have already visited this school, but if you haven't, he is very famous for being a meditation teacher there. And he also is a clinical meditation teacher at the Health Lodge in Byron Bay. He studied yoga and meditation about 20 plus years and has over 2,000 hours of formal training. And he's a qualified, he holds a diploma of yogic studies through the Satyananda School of Yoga, which is a branch of Bihar Yoga or school. And it's one of the oldest schools of India, actually, Bihar Yoga School. And he's also a registered teacher at the Meditation Australia. Excuse me. So as a teacher, he seeks to guide his students and teachers with the traditional practices of yoga nidra and meditation. He empowers modern yogis with the potential of practices that makes them relevant and popular as a system of well-being and self-discovery. He is really an expert on meditation, and that's why I thought we'd bring him on and really talk about what he's so passionate about. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Supriya. It's lovely to be here. I'm really excited. You're one of my favorite people, and this is one of my favorite topics of conversation. So it's a nice marriage.
Mariage. Well, thank you. Thank you to also sharing your time and, bringing your energy to the channel, which is all about transformation. We are always in a cycle of change, as you know, and through the last 2 years, one of the reasons why I started this channel and podcast show is because there is a natural collective transformation that's taking place, right? So that's why we want to talk to those people out on their journey to let them know that, hey, we're here and you can reach out to us. And I think, my friends in the industry like yourself can also speak to that, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the Byron Bay scene since the pandemic hit?
Oh, there's a question. Okay, so you've probably heard of COVID-19.
Tell me what that is.
I don't. Let's not go there. Let's just assume people know what COVID-19 is. And it's been, look, let's say it's a very challenging time to run a yoga business and any sort of business that facilitates bringing people together and sharing a space together. However, that said, there's also been incredible opportunities. Change forces us to innovate, and often we don't like to change. I don't really like to change, and however, we were forced to change, and so we've been forced to innovate and create beyond what we were originally doing. So I have a yoga studio, Bamboo Yoga, which has been running for about 5 years or so in Byron Bay. We've got a beautiful shala there, which we teach a whole range of yoga and meditation practices, and we teach vinyasa, hatha practices, yin practices, and we were primarily face-to-face, and we were slowly but surely, steadily moving towards into teacher training over the last 5 years. It was always part of, to be honest, like the reason we built Bamboo Yoga as it is to facilitate the teacher training element of it. But the studio I felt like it was an important thing to do, to have, and I love it, and I've put a huge amount of energy into creating it. We built this incredible studio from scratch, which was a big journey. But then all of a sudden we were shut down. So that was significant. That's been ebbs and flows since then. The shutdown I think the first one, we stayed closed for about 6 months. I actually ended up going to the snow. We could have reopened actually a bit earlier, but it was the middle of winter, and I had decided to go down and spend the ski season in Jindabyne, and I taught at a wonderful yoga studio down there called Jindabyne Yoga, which is run by Jane Corbin and an amazing faculty. Jane had actually been in Byron and had taught some classes with us, so we knew each other, and that was a love for me to have a bit of a reset and have a bit of a break. And there was a bit of a moment where I really contemplated whether to reopen, but we chose to. And since then, I think we've had 3 or 4 more open and closes, and those are really difficult. I often sort of talk about like having a yacht, and you've got your yacht sailing and it's got energy and the sails are unfurled, there's wind in the sails and you're projecting forward, and there's a bit of momentum which will keep you going. But as soon as you stop, pull down the sails, put everything away, then the actual job of resetting everything and getting going is significant and really quite draining, to be honest. And I think there was 3 or 4 times that had to happen. One time we were only reopened for a week, and there was 1 case that came into Byron, and then they just shut everything down again. So it would have almost been easier to just have a continued lockdown. But hey, you know, we've innovated through that time. We didn't actually get hugely onto teaching virtually, teaching online, not with our regular classes. I come from a background in digital media, and I knew the amount of work that it would be required to make that happen. And I valued taking a bit of rest. I did have actually, I don't have that job anymore. I let it go. But I did have another job in the digital space where I could continue to work, and that sort of filled up. So I just sort of kept ticking over, and I've been teaching yoga full time for a fairly significant amount of time. So I was quite grateful for a break. But then in that time, I started to develop this curriculum for the meditation teacher training, which has been on my mind and in my heart for years and years and years and years. So that was a great opportunity, and that we have, again, we've delivered it now a number of times. We've done 2 full runs through. We've got our next intake coming up very soon, and the last one we actually offered it digitally, so we offered it online and face-to-face, which was challenging. So I think, you know, as far as the business goes, this merging between the digital space and the face-to-face traditional people in a room together, that's been a really interesting space to explore for sure. And I'm still, you know, new into that, and I've always wanted to go there, but I'm fairly cautious with my steps forward. So yeah, I'm still looking forward to learning more and experiencing more in the year to come.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it gives us a picture about that we're all in it together, no matter where you are on earth. I mean, you know, in terms of lockdowns and the restrictions that everyone's faced in their businesses and their ongoing life, you know, styles. One of the things that we've done at Seva is just basically switched everything online to sustain the continuing relationship with our students and support the students in a consistent way, because of this, you know, that sales coming up and sales going down, and not sales as in money sales, but the sales of the ship that you you know. So yeah, it's interesting because your teacher training talks about meditation more than the yoga more. Tell us a little bit about it, because, you know, we don't hear much about a meditation focused teacher training. We will hear about, you know, do a certain amount of training and learn meditation, but we don't hear much about meditation teacher training. What's the difference between a yoga teacher training and a meditation teacher training?
Well, that is an interesting question. Look, I come from the yoga tradition, so I am a yogic meditation teacher. So obviously meditation is a very broad concept. There's various lineages. I have studied in various lineages, but my key training is within the yoga tradition. So the difference, I wish I could just call it a yoga training that included, and people would understand that is meditation. It's a bugbear that I have. And I, often address this with my students. They come and say, well, that's just to be clear, we're studying yoga here. This is not out of, like, there's not yoga and then there's meditation. This is yoga, but we're talking about meditation in the yogic tradition, and a lot of modern yoga has forgotten that to some degree. I mean, look, there's different spins on it. If you look at the way, at a vinyasa practice or a hatha practice or a yin yoga practice, anything that brings your mind and body into balance and creating a sense of harmony, there is, in my opinion, a practice of meditation. And that, I think, is a commonly accepted idea amongst many yoga teachers. However, the seated meditation practices and the lying down meditation practices have been somewhat diminished and to a degree forgotten in modern yoga. And I mean, I speak to a lot of people, and I have a lot of students who come to my courses and who come to classes. I also teach hatha yoga, I teach vinyasa, I teach lots of different stuff. I love strong physical asana, and I teach all of those things. But it's not included this in a lot of teacher trainings, the meditation, and there's quite a lot to learn. So what is a meditation training? It's a training that focuses just on the meditational aspects of yoga. So it's framed in the Yoga Sutras. Ultimately, I would call the Yoga Sutras as probably the definitive guidebook in the yoga tradition on meditation. It's a sort of a step-by-step instruction manual. The techniques are mainly tantric, but there's seated meditation techniques. We use a lot of breath work, so there's a lot of pranayama in there, and we do a lot of yoga nidra. So it's ultimately a system of meditation. That's a really good one. It works really, really well. And there's lots of different techniques that we can use, not lots, but there's a sufficient number of different techniques that we can use either individually or as a system of, using a number of techniques together to create a practice that's appropriate for wherever we are and whatever time it is.
So when, with the Yoga Sutras, which chapter are you referring to? Chapter 2 and chapter 1?
Everyone, all chapters. I mean, the Yoga Sutra, step by step, if you look, it's a definitive guide from yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, we're coming inwards, dharana, we're learning how to concentrate, dhyan, hallelujah, we're in meditation. That's so, but every single, look, it's a holistic, and this is probably where you're coming from. Again, I'm talking about yoga and in the holistic sense. So it's not just meditation on the cushion. So again, yoga and meditation can be used fairly interchangeably. And there is, as I say, it's a little bit of a bugbear. I wish I could just call it yoga and people would understand what I mean. It's part of it's actually just marketing, really, to be clear, just so people actually understand that they're not going to be coming and doing vinyasa. They're coming. They're not going to. We do include asana. I think again, it's a really, you can't really, in my opinion, in my experience, it's hard to have a comfortable, sustainable meditation experience when you haven't done an asana practice, when your body's imbalanced. But asana for asana's sake, asana is a form of exercise. I think, I could take or leave that. But asana and hatha yoga is a fundamental part of the system. I don't think you can leave it out. But again, what I'm trying to do is ultimately broaden the scope of what modern yoga is accepting as yoga. And I think more and more people are coming to that anyway. It's not just, I'm not talking in isolation. People have had lots of experience with yoga. The Western world, ultimately, we got the yoga that we needed. We were so rajasic that we needed something that was pretty fast-paced and intense. And I think more and more we're coming back to understanding that yoga is a practice for self-awareness and self-realization. And the way to really to go deeper in that is there needs to be some sort of seated contemplative practice involved, I think.
That's beautiful. I agree with you. I feel the marketplace has its place in misleading people quite a bit in when it comes to understanding what yoga is. And because when you go back to the sutras, as you know, there's only 1 or 2 sutras or verses on what asana is, you know. It's just, it's a very little segment that he's put in the system about what asana is, yet we do have a body, and this is the body's need, you know, for it to be relaxed, for it to sit and offer us space to do that work, to focus the mind. So that's really beautiful. I'm really glad that you identified the need to change the narrative about what yoga is. And we need to all, yes, practice it, also teach it, you know, and put it in the curriculum wherever we can, because, you know, there's this industry of, you know, pre-recorded meditations, visualizations, and all of that. What's the difference between what you teach and what's out there that's called meditation? Because this is something that a lot of people still, I feel, get misled by, as in what, you know, and they say, I meditate, I'm meditating. What do you meditate? What do you do?
I'm always curious when people say that. I'm going to say, what do you do? So, I've just kind of, I mean, a lot of the time it's just sitting there, which is nice. It's actually really, really, I think, useful and good and positive. But I've had that similar conversation with numerous people. I'm working with a system, and it's not a system that I've invented.
Yes.
It is a system that's based on classical tantra and classical yogic. So we have a theoretical system, which is mainly the Yoga Sutras, but also we're referencing the Gita and other sort of core important text. It's very, most of the philosophical underpinnings are coming from Sankhya philosophy, which ultimately underpins the Yoga Sutras. So I'm big on yogic philosophy. I find it to be such an amazing, impressive system, and there's no questions that really haven't been asked before. So we're walking in the footsteps of giants, people who have been asking these questions and exploring this path for a long period of time. And as far as the technique goes, there are really specific techniques that, as I said, mainly from Tantra, and I teach in the lineage, as you mentioned before, of the Bihar School of Yoga, which was founded by Swami Satchidananda and is now carried on by Swami Niranjan. Their grandfather guru, if you put it, was Swami Shivananda of Rishikesh. So there's this Vedantan tradition. There are sannyasis in that tradition, and they've done a really good job of qualifying these practices and actually putting them into books. So that was Satchidananda's great gift to the world. Ultimately, Bihar Yoga was set up like a university, and they have a huge number of books. You've probably seen them, and which give a really systematic step-by-step understanding of how to meditate. And the thing about tantric practices is they are very detailed in the sense that they give instructions, do this, and it's staged. So you have an initial stage, which is ultimately most of the time just to sit, get comfortable, and there's practices to bring you into a steady posture in your body, and then there's practices to quite systematically unpack your mind. So there is a lot of technical structure. So it's not just a question of sitting there. It's a question of sitting there and doing something. You know, you're being asked to do something quite active with your mind a lot of the time.
Yes. And that's ultimately the system of, you know, Patanjali as well, because dharana, dhyana, samadhi, you know, they're all active action oriented things. You know, to be able to grasp this intangible thing called the mind, you have to do things, you know. So yeah, it's really good that you clarified that for our listeners and our viewers, because there are lots of versions of what we call meditation in the West, but what is meditation as a system? It's really important for us to know, because of the actual purpose of meditation. So can you tell us a little bit about the system that you use from the school you attended, Bihar School? What is the Lineages Meditation all about? And what's the actual ultimate goal for this system? What's the goal? I know we all know the ultimate goal is liberation of the soul, but yeah, what is this leading to? You know, like, what is this leading to?
Well, liberation of the soul.
Yeah.
It is, the system has, as I said, it's been codified through not just Swami Satchidananda. I think he was really good at bringing people together and actually grabbing the information that was probably already there and documenting it. So a lot of this stuff was it was an oral tradition, so it was handed down. There were tantric Upanishads that were written down as well. So it was a mix of, but there certainly weren't broadly published books. And so it was probably quite shocking at the time when people started publishing this stuff. But he knew probably what needed to be done, and that has become in many ways sort of the gold standard of yogic meditation techniques that has underpinned a lot of the more deeper understanding of yoga in the West. And so what essentially it's a step-by-step guide to liberation from, you know, from where you are. And there's you and I met
Yes.
on a Kriya Yoga course, which Kriya Yoga, and I'm just, give me a second, I've got a book here I want to show you.
Call it a course, Mark. I don't like to call it a course. That was my initiation by Swami Satyadharma into Kriya Yoga, being a Kriya yogi, right? Because
yeah,
I was hesitant to take my initiation from anybody on my journey because of the adverse effects that it can have on a person who's living in an urban society, you know, because the practices are so powerful. You need a conducive environment to ascend, you know. So yeah, I wouldn't call it a course. I would call it an initiation. That was really good. Yeah, we
it was
went there.
a very powerful course, a very interesting place to meet, because they wouldn't let anyone into that course. It was interesting, the story of Kriya Yoga through the Satchidananda tradition. They used to teach it quite liberally, and I think Swami Satya, again, pretty smart guy, and you know, at times a bit of a working outside the box, and he just started teaching those Kriya Yoga courses. Swami Satchidananda was one of those teachers who, to everybody, you know, you come in, you do like a 2-day initiation, and that's advanced practice. That is advanced practice. You're going straight to the pointy end of yoga practice. And when you're getting that initiation, however, there were bounce backs, so people were going crazy. They were giving them these really advanced practices. People were taking it on board and doing lots of it, and they went, okay, we're going to pull back. That Kriya Yoga course that you and I did was the first one that had been offered through Mangrove in 20 years or so. And that was quite intentional, because they said, oh, okay, it's too reckless. Let's go back to the basics. Let's teach asana. Let's teach pranayama. Let's teach karma yoga. I think that's one of, you know, that is one of that lineage's great gifts, and it's what they were really sort of stringent on, is like, if you want to get this stuff, you need to have a practice of integrated yoga. So you're practicing yoga in your daily life, and ashrams are obviously very conducive for that, but you don't have to be in an ashram, as long as there's this self-reflection, self-awareness. And so what I'm teaching more is the preliminary stage. And I'll show you this book, which you may have, and you may see, this is a huge Satchidananda's magnum opus on Kriya Yoga. But before that, like, Kriya Yoga sort of comes in the last bit. It's the first bit is actually just basic asana and pranayama, and then these preliminary, lots of yoga nidra, and these preliminary meditation techniques, which are getting you to the point where you can go deeper and you can sit for long enough, which is so important. Everyone wants to go to the advanced stuff, but really what most of us need are the basics. And what I do most of the time these days are just the basics, just the practice of antamon, which is a basic mindfulness technique, becoming aware of my thoughts, my patterns of thinking, not seeing vrittis as they're occurring. And there's beautiful, this is so well thought out. These practices are really elegant. They teach us how to unpack the machinations of our mind and all these vrittis and the vasanas that are driving us. So we're beginning to understand more and more what's there and why it's there. And when I'm acting in the moment, I can hopefully have some information. Oh, okay, yeah, there's me doing that again. And this is when meditation becomes alive in our life. So again, it is very clearly documented. There's a very clear system of practices. The main ones, I mean, Yoga Nidra is a huge part of it. Again, that was one of Satchidananda's great gifts. He didn't create, he didn't invent Yoga Nidra, but he certainly did a great job of codifying it and popularizing it in the West. There are other traditions that are using Yoga Nidra, but in my opinion, again, it's one of those practices that people really need. It's hard to go forward when you haven't got the ability to rest and just slow down, Supriya. I feel like that is such, if we're looking for an outcome from meditation that people want and need in the modern time, it's just slow down.
Yes. That is the gold. That is a new black, of our society. I feel okay. So for as we were talking about the lineage, the Satyananda lineage, what are some of the practices that are preliminary, and what does that help? What is the outcome of those practices?
Well, asana is preliminary. So again, it's a meditation system that assumes that you are doing some form of asana, and there is a system of asana that they teach. To be honest, I don't do a lot of the Satchidananda system of asana. It's great, it works really well, but there's a lot of very slow movements. Like you would have done the Shakti Bandhas or the Paramuktasana series, where it's really slow movement. It's very difficult to engage people on that in the modern yoga world. Most because I've also trained through the lineage of Krishnamacharya, with the lineage more of Patabi Joyce and V.K.S. Iyengar. So I've done a lot of sort of more dynamic asana in my time before I came to Satchidananda Yoga. So for me, that being physically challenged is important, and I think that's more what people are looking for, that I see in the world, and when they're coming to a studio class. So I'm trying to meet people sort of where they are and then take them a little bit further perhaps. And the practices that I'm engaged, Yoga Nidra, I run a lot of Yoga Nidra trainings and a lot of Yoga Nidra classes. It's so accessible, it's so easy, and it's a breakthrough practice that ultimately people, including myself, who've tried meditation for a long time with varying levels of success and being able to concentrate and whatever, dealing with anxiety, which is a huge impediment to success in meditation. Yoga Nidra is a wonderful antidote for anxiety, existential anxiety. It just helps us to drop into a space where some would argue that it's not actually meditation per se in the sort of definition of the yoga tradition, but I would counter that it's part of a system, and it's an essential part of a system that we're doing a lot of the same. In Yoga Nidra, we are practicing dharana, and we can, I think, have deep practices of dhyan, but there's something else going on as well. I mean, Yoga Nidra is its own thing, and it's one of my great loves of my life. I'm so grateful for having discovered it as someone who's got a tendency towards being a little bit anxious. It's been a wonderful gift in my life, and it is a core part of my personal practice. However, it's also a wonderful thing to teach and to share with people, because I see again and again people having incredible breakthroughs when, particularly when in a teacher training environment where we're doing applied over a period of time with a very specific technique. They're going to it again, and just people come to me with that. I had a bunch of students who were going through during the lockdowns, and they were in Sydney last year, and who just, was so moved by the practice, not by me, but by their connection to the practice. They were locked at home. One girl in particular living in the inner city of Sydney. And we had two students who were, locked down in small apartments, couldn't do much. And so that ability to regulate their nervous system was just such a gift. So that's lovely to hear. And then there's also, a system of techniques. A japa is another really important one, which is an internal.
That's a mantra-based meditation.
Correct. Yeah. So a japa is the foundation stone for Kriya Yoga. Ultimately, teaching us.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I mean,
okay.
See, even like me speaking the language is just so misleading, isn't it? Mantra meditation. It is a mantra is dharana, you know. So yeah, so japa is a technique, right? So that's what you teach as a preliminary practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a japa is a huge system actually of that is, I mean, look, the amount of information that is there, the amount of different techniques that are available through the Bihar School of Yoga, it's too much for most people. It's enough for a lifetime. You spend 10, if you wanted to work through it progressively, it would take you 10 years. But I mean, for a japa is a big part of our course. And if you look at like transcendental meditation is a great example, and Vedic meditation, which is a sort of a modern incarnation of that, they just took one technique essentially, which is a japa. And it's an internal mantra practice, the effortless mantra. It's a very similar technique. And that's their whole school is built on that one single technique. Whereas one of the problems I think that yogic meditation can have is there's just so much on offer. There's so much and on offer that it can be a bit confusing. But so we're sort of dealing with the 3 core techniques of yoga nidra, a japa, which is this internal mantra technique, which helps us to steady our minds, and antamona, which is very similar to Vipassana. It's a mindfulness practice, again, of becoming open and aware in a seated practice, but of our just creating a sense of vairagya, gentle detachment to thoughts, feelings, experiences, and sort of it's a practice of open monitoring meditation. We're more of a mindfulness based practice.
Super. So when this level is integrated into life, daily life, how long, I mean, once they finish your course, how long do they put towards self-practice daily, concentrated?
Well, the course, the way we're delivering it is delivered over about 9 weeks. And there's a huge so there's a week-long intensive where they get the practices, and then there's an 8-week sadhana where you are expected to practice 4 to 5 times a week, do the practices.
Like, is there a prescribed time you ask your trainees or people to sit and meditate, or do they practice?
Yeah, usually half an hour a day of seated. It's half an hour a day, like during the course, half an hour a day of seated meditation and half an hour of yoga nidra. And I would say each of those practice 4, and then there's a breath work component. But this is in a teacher training environment, like where I'm asking a fair bit. You know, I think for the average person to sit and meditate for half an hour every day is quite a lot to expect. But it's possible depending on what stage of life you're at. But if you want to become a teacher, it's essential because you need to know those practices so intimately. But I think for anyone else, like you can do a lot if you add a 10-minute practice into your life. And I think that's where yoga nidra. So if we're talking about the general population, finding any time is great. 10 minutes. Yoga nidra is wonderful because it's something we can do and we can get the rest we really need lying down. It seems to be very accessible for people. Getting up and meditating for half an hour first thing in the morning might be really challenging. If you've got young kids or you know, busy life, it can be challenging. But there's always time for a mindful moment, you know, 5 minutes here and there, 1 minute, one conscious breath. One of the things that I did really want to mention, sort of been brought up, is that I am teaching, as you say, from a lineage. So it's a very specific system that we're working with. And, you know, it's all coming out of books. It's nothing I've invented. And it's traditional. So it's based on quite a long lineage. However, what we're also doing is teaching in this modern context. And one of the things I'm really passionate about doing is bringing in modern science. So we've got a psychologist and a couple of medical professionals we're doing a lot with polyvagal theory, and we're looking into neuroscience and understanding how meditation works neurologically. And there's incredible research being done at the moment, which for me, it's just, it's amazing. It really gets me excited to understand how this stuff, brain science, how it actually works, and what
impacts us.
What's that? Sorry.
How it impacts the practitioner.
Yes, yes. So the specific practices are working in quite intentional ways, although a lot of the time, you know, the yogis who invented them didn't know exactly what they were doing, not neurologically, but they knew that they had an effect. And when we're talking about, you know, specific pranayama, I mean, look at Brahmari, for example, the hummingbee breath. They're now understanding nitric oxide, which is this incredible molecule which has been identified, and the incredible effect that nitric oxide has on increasing blood flow ultimately, and helping us to relax. And so it was always taught as a tranquilizing practice, breathwork, pranayama practice. However, now they understand why, because it's this practice is stimulating nitric oxide, and that is having a dilation effect on your vascular system, helping you to just go. It's beautiful now. And again, looking at Kapalbhati, for example, the skull shining breath, we're understanding more clearly how that is actually affecting the frontal lobe of our mind and our brain and our cognitive abilities. And so how these different pranayama effects practices work on the brain. And again, the same thing with meditation techniques. So looking at this overarching framework, and the Western science, they talk about essentially open monitoring practices, which are mindfulness practices. And how one of the I really love to teach our students is, and I think it's important for teachers to understand, is that if someone has done whatever practices they've done in their life, whether it's a Buddhist practice, whether it's a Qigong practice, how it actually fits within the framework, and looking at open monitoring as a sort of a system of being able to regulate in the moment, whether you call that karma yoga, whether you call that mindfulness or antamona or vipassana, they're ultimately trying to do the same thing, helping to cultivate vairagya, and they all do the same thing. So you might have played around with a few of them in your time, and you come to this practice. I was like, oh, okay, that's doing the same thing that this one's doing. And the same thing with our concentration practices, our focused attention, whether that's Kriya Yoga, whether that is doing a mantra japa practice, or whether that is focusing on a dot on the wall, or just focusing, listening to a specific sound. There's lots of different ways that we can explore the same idea, or whether that's in asana, dharana as a practice in asana, focusing on our breath, focusing on our alignment, focusing on our movement, being focused on an intentional specific thing. There's so many ways that we can do that, but they have the same outcome. And that is ultimately to increase our capacity for concentration, helping us to become steady and present in the moment. So that's where the conversation is I think really interesting, is being able to contextualize ultimately everything that we've done.
Yeah.
That sort of makes
in modern ways.
In modern ways, yeah. So ultimately what you've studied and practiced, and what I've studied and practiced, techniques probably different, but outcome ultimately the same.
Yeah, this is interesting, because I've been conversing with a few people around this whole, you know, the whys, and treating it as a medicine for when needed, you know, sort of like you said, if I was to feel triggered right now, you know, if I got triggered right now by somebody saying something, and how do I regulate, you know, self-regulate? What sort of yoga techniques can I use to self-regulate and down-regulate, so that I can, you know, stay calm through a moment of great, you know, anxiety or whatever the reaction I'm having. So that's important to know. At the same time, I feel like to develop an abhyasa, like you have to have consistency in your practice. Don't you think? Like you have to have momentum in your practice, so that like you have pramana, which is, you know, the evidence from your own practice itself, and it's a lived experience to kind of trust that technique. A lot of my teachings to my students and my school is that without practice, there's no teaching. Without practice, you cannot embody the medicine it is. And you can give a person so much information about all sorts of benefits and, you know, all sorts of knowledge, but if you haven't got any embodiment of it, like if you can't hold that practice in your own being, and then there is, there's a big gap there. So yeah, I mean, prana, for one aspect of the practice is prana management. How do we learn that? It's through practicing. Otherwise we don't know what it feels like to deal with prana. Pranayama is so misinterpreted in this world, because I've seen people giving there's some crash courses you can do on pranayama or kundalini initiations and all that, and these are all very haphazard, accidental experiences people are playing with no actual held container for carrying an embodied experience. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's why this preliminary, or what you call preliminary, the basics, or what sounds so simple, is so important in daily routine, because that little small step is the small step we have to be taking daily to solidify and call it our practice. If I don't have a practice, then I don't know what it is.
And look, a lot of courses that I've seen are essentially just workshops. They're really, teacher training courses, they're actually just giving you a lot of information, and they're not giving you the vessel for you to integrate and the leadership and the mentorship. And I know that's something that we've discussed in the past, that we've both identified as being fundamental, because we were given it. And I got incredible guidance, incredible support and mentorship. I can't, I'm humbled by it. And I realize now it's like how much effort is actually required to maintain that. But it's fun for the lineage to continue appropriately. We must be there for our students. We must, if we're going to give them the practices, we must be there to hold their hands as they explore and experiment and experience with these practices. And then ultimately, if they've got, one of my favorite things, I've just been reviewing actually a whole lot of assessments recently, people teaching, giving me a recording of meditation practices that I've taught them. And one of my favorite things to do is when I hear somebody who's obviously embodied the practice, and they've got a very clear technique of stages that they need to work through with these techniques. So they've taken it, they've done the technique, they've listened to my recordings or done my classes, and they've understood what the practice is about and what it's actually trying to do for them, and ultimately what they're trying to support other people to learn through that practice. And then they've taken that and they've just given it their own little je ne sais quoi, whether that's the wording or just the essence of the practice. And I can feel that they're teaching from an embodied place, and it's really obvious. I think it's really, really obvious when somebody is teaching from a deeply embodied sadhana, when they've had the experience and they're talking about a personal relationship with their practice. You can see it. You can really, as a teacher of teachers, it becomes very obvious very quickly. And that's what we want, don't we? I think we want people who are teaching from their own practice.
Exactly. No, actually, I'm a big fan of, not creating more robots in the industry, that are just speaking their teacher's lines. Rather, you get the formula, learn the system, and then embody it and speak from that. And that's what the Seva model is really about, the teaching aspect of it.
Yeah.
The teaching aspect is, you're your own human being, and you have your own experience that you're living through. But at the same time, speak from your body, but there is a formula that should be in your body, and then you speak. And that's what you just described.
Yeah. And I mean, the other flip side of that, as I've heard it described, is people just, I heard Rod Stryker say, he calls it MSU, when people just make shit up. And there's a lot of that goes on, particularly when you're going into the more esoteric side of meditation. People just, I'm just going to make up a meditation. And there's a lot of that goes on. A tantra, because they haven't been taught properly, and they know they kind of get a little bit of information from here and there and here and there, and then they just fill in the gaps and make up something which it might be nice, but it's not.
Part of a system. It's not part of a system, and it doesn't achieve the goal that it was intended for. And
Yes.
this is where lineage, and this is where traditional versus modern, let's go grocery shopping from this school, that school, and and then make up a meal out of mismatched. This is very common, and this is why we need proper training, proper mentorship, proper guidance, and students being willing to actually be students, and being students, and not look for these short-term titles, because another thing is the students that go into these short courses and then get to teach them without embodiment, there's a huge marketplace that is just promoting, here, buy this, train in this so that you can resell it. I really advocate against it, because this is not academia studies, right? This is for personal development. It's your evolution, so it's not for you to sell at all. But if you attract students, hey, you are gold, it's great, because you've been doing your practice. So Seva is like all of, Seva means, to be of service, but then you have to do it for you first. And that's a value system that's very, it's lost in the pop culture, I feel, of yoga, where people are doing courses after courses, and those are the make shit up kind of category of people, because they just don't have the patience to sit with one school or one teacher for various reasons. Maybe the school doesn't give that longer program, or that provision for coaching, mentoring, ongoing support, or maybe the student just doesn't have the patience, they just don't sit with the practice for long enough. So that's one of my points of frustration, because there's a lot of accidental practice that happens, and even looking at the industry as it is now, a lot of people watch YouTube to just learn lines, learn cues, and that's this is just the quality of information that's out there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, having you teaching this, what is in English called basic, but it's actually a foundation, it's foundation, which is so important to building a house or a mansion. So I'm really passionate about that, what you're doing.
One of the things that is sort of held fairly tightly in the Satchidananda Yoga lineage is this, like, looking at the chakras, the methodology of chakra, is that we stabilize the upper chakras first. So we've got Agnya, I'm sure but people who don't, Agnya, Vishuddhi, Anahat, Manipur, Swadhisthana, and Muladhara, and this idea in Kundalini of rising up Shakti and ultimately looking to balance Kundalini. What a lot of the modern practices do, and certainly if you look at Kriya Yoga, the way it was brought to the West, people wanted to get high, and Kundalini gets you high if we're doing lots of dynamic asana, lots of dynamic Kriya, and we're raising Kundalini up. And our teacher Satchidama, and many of my teachers, I think it was one of the core, it is one of the core teachings in this Satchidananda Yoga lineage, the Bihar school of yoga, is that we stabilize the upper chakras first. So yes, they have the full gamut of practices. They have the Kundalini activation practices, and probably more dynamic ones than most people would ever want to go near. But what they were passionate about and become increasingly passionate, because they've got lineage, they've got 80 years of history with this lineage of people doing these practices, and that will, which is tapping into hundreds of thousands of years before that, is that they should be done in supervision. If you're going to do the advanced activation practices, you need to stabilize the upper chakras first. And traditionally, and yoga was always taught in a teacher to student in supervision. So you would go to your guru's ashram, the supervision, and you would be there for a significant period of time, and you would start probably by cleaning the floors. That would be your initiations. Like, there's a scrubbing brush, there's the floor, you start scrubbing, sweeping. Well, that was when I went to the Bihar school of yoga. That was where it was. It hasn't changed much there. But then you would be taught, probably given a mantra. That would be a really early on, you would be given a personal mantra, and that's to stabilize Agni chakra, and then you would be doing some kirtan, stabilizing Vishuddha, and you'll be doing ultimately karma yoga with your peers and learning how to give, learning seva. So what they did, I mean, that is the fundamental. Seva is the fundamental value that we need to cultivate in ourselves, so that what happens on a very pragmatic level, when we do turn up the temperature, if I've got some narcissistic imbalance in me somewhere, that if I start to turn up the temperature through advanced Kriya or Kundalini practice, even advanced asana can do the same thing. Any sort of active, dynamic prana building practice, is that it's just going to bust me out. I've often compared it to a soundboard. If you're doing a sound check for a music concert, that you would do it at low volume, and you would do your EQ, and you would balance all the different sounds, all the different all the different on the graphic equalizer, and then you would then turn up the volume. Otherwise, you're going to go, oh, that's going to sound really, really bad. And this is the same idea with an integrated practice. So it's learning mantra, it's learning simple meditation techniques to stabilize our upper chakras, and learning how to give, and just coming to realize it's not something we learn, it's something that is just inherently true. It's not a piece of information, is that Seva is the destination of that is the pathway spiritually. We must learn how to work selflessly, and to whatever we do, it needs to be for the benefit of the greater good, because otherwise, from the yogic perspective, if you haven't figured that out, and if you're not acting from that perspective, you get given power, and then that power is going to go, and it's going to cause damage for us and inevitably the people around us.
Beautiful, beautiful. So many things I could bring up about that, but I'll stick on I'll stay on course
Sure.
for today's episode's sake. But yeah, beautifully said. And it's, yeah, I'm sure the listeners and the viewers are resonating with that. We need more guidance, and we need more community around those value systems, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Seva is the pathway.
Ultimately, it comes from that whole philosophy of, it's not about what I can take from yoga, it's what I can give back to, what I can give. So I think that's the cultural difference I noticed, that from when you and I met. And since then, growing as a yoga teacher myself and in the industry, I've seen the shift where everything has become really fastly consumable to be utilized in some way that's for a gain, rather than, hey, I am embodying a value system here, and, I want to give or gift to where I am, instead of just, hey, it's about my body, it's about the shape, and it's about how many chaturangas I can do,
how many Instagram followers I can get.
Yes, exactly. So it's really good. It's refreshing to hear that Byron's got it going on there as well. So
there's a good yoga heritage in Byron. I came up here 20 years ago to study yoga, over 20 years actually now, like, goodness, I'm getting old, like 22, 23 years ago. And there has been a really long lineage of quality yoga. I mean, lots of fluff as well. You find fluff everywhere, but I feel honored and I feel obligated to continue that.
Yes.
And we hear a lot about fluff in the yoga world, but I also see a lot of good stuff too. I talk to you and I talk to other contemporaries and friends, and I see a lot of people who really care, who are doing their absolute best to carry it forward. There's a lot to be positive and hopeful about.
Now, I wanted to ask, when looking at your student groups and people that you have passed on your wisdom and your trainings to, what sort of resistance do you see come up from students towards committing to the meditation part?
I think people like to flit around a bit and try a bit of this and try a bit of that. I had somebody tell me the other day, it was actually a hairdresser. It was really lovely. He said, "Oh, I feel like yoga's not so cool anymore." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, no, I don't know if yoga ever was cool." But I'd also say that it's being self-aware, developing a holistic sense of who you are and how you are, understanding karma as it integrates into your life, self-discovery, self-enlightenment. That's the coolest thing there ever will be. It's not just a question of, is Lululemon still cool? It's is, this vinyasa studio still cool? And there's a lot of that goes around, trust me. But there's also self-awareness, self-discovery. That's timeless cool. But it should also be fairly under the radar, and that. So I think what the resistance probably comes from when people don't really understand the scope of what we're talking about. That it's not just let's get really good at doing handstands, because that's going to get taken away. You could be the best handstander in the world, but that's going to get taken away from you probably sooner rather than you think. You might be able to do it now, but maybe 5-10 years time, maybe you can, maybe you become really, but ultimately it will be dedicated, taken away from it. But that's the things that can never get taken away, is that sense of who we are, understanding our karma, understanding our dharma, and living our dharma, that fulfillment that comes from living your dharma. And that's what yoga can give you. That's what a devoted practice, and you don't have to do 10,000 yoga classes to get that, but you do need to have a dedicated course of study, I think, for a period of time to get the information, get the download, get the full scope of what's actually supposed to be going on, and then apply that for the rest of our lives. And meditation must be a part of that. There's no system of yoga that I've seen that doesn't include meditation. However, if we look at the classical texts, and most of my references in the classical teaching of yoga, like the stuff that was happening for thousands of years before the last sort of 30, 40, 50 years, all of the classical teachings, yoga was 90% meditation. And now we just need to rebalance. So I think once people get the scope of actually what's happening when they're meditating and what's happening when we've got an applied sadhana over a period of time, that's when they get right, this is the coolest thing ever, and give me more, please. It's like, why would you ever turn your back on that if you had that in your life?
And if you knew. So it gets me to ask you a little bit about you. What sort of did you ever resist it? I mean, what made you commit?
Yeah. I had to. What
happened?
I mean, I've often Mark's breakdown story. Well, I was introduced. I mean, as I said, I did a lot of really dynamic vinyasa, Ashtanga vinyasa.
Yoga.
Well, it was in the lineage of Patavi Joy, so it wasn't so much power yoga, but fairly dynamic vinyasa focused yoga, and I did that for a long period of time, and that was great. And then I had, probably 15 years ago, a lot of difficulties with how I was relating and showing up in life. I was in a relationship. I had a new child. I was in a complicated relationship, and that relationship fell apart, and I became really lost. And I actually found a psychologist who was an insight meditation teacher, so trained through the Buddhist tradition. And I saw her for about 3 years, and she introduced me to Vipassana. And I studied with Vipassana for some time, and that was really difficult, but I could see that there was a benefit. And that was actually shortly after that, I came to Satchidananda Yoga, and I found the Mangrove Yoga Ashram, and then they brought it all together. I was like, right, this is, because I really felt like I needed the physical practice. I felt like that was still super, and still remains super important for me. Whereas in Vipassana, they actually often discourage you from doing the physical practice and, just meditate through the discomfort. And that never really quite made sense. But I love an integrated practice. And that was my resistance. I often didn't want to face up to my stuff. I can be lazy. I can, there's still resistance to sadhana. I like to sleep in. I like to do the fun things. And I see things pop up in my life And that's like, oh, okay, and becoming accountable. And this idea of dynamic meditation, which is ultimately karma yoga, which is us becoming aware in our daily life. And that is showing up and operating in real time. And so I can see my impulses operating and as they play out and regulate in the moment. So it's not just becoming a seated practice, it's a dynamic meditation practice. And that's ultimately where we're going with meditation, is that we're becoming self-aware in the real time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your voice. Lovely to connect with you on this platform. So where can people find you?
I was just saying we could go on
and
on, yes. I'm sure. But yeah, thank you so much for the conversation. As I say, I've always been very respectful and of your journey and your passion and commitment as a yogi and as an Ayurveda teacher, and your willingness to show up and do the work. So it's an honor to share the path with you, Supriya.
Saluting you too. So where can people connect with you? Just for people listening, I will put the details in the comments box, but where can people find you?
Okay, well, I exist in the real time. I'm here. I live in Byron Bay, and I have a studio there. I am not just online. I exist in the real world. So we've got a Bamboo Yoga Byron. I teach there regularly. We've got lots of things going with bambooyogabyron.com is our website. And we've got a beautiful studio in Byron Bay, this beautiful sort of bamboo Balinese style shala, which if you ever get the chance, come and visit. Otherwise, I am running various courses, etc. And you can see all the details of that on Instagram and all the rest of it, all the socials. Okay. And you can connect with me personally or the Bamboo Yoga Byron journey. I'm sort of involved in all of that. So yeah, I love it when people come to see me in Byron. That's always a real treat.
Yes, I'm still in that line. I'm yet to come down and see you in doing your thing at Bamboo Yoga Byron. I will put the website details down in the description box. And yes, you can find Mark Purser on Instagram, Facebook under his details. And also, I think the main site is Bamboo Yoga Byron, right? They're also on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. So all the specials and all the things that are going on, you can find those details there. But yeah, it's been amazing chatting to you and bringing you to the channel, Mark. Amazing energy again. Did you have fun?
I love it. Yeah, it's, as I say, it's my favorite topic of conversation. So the hardest thing is to know when to shut up.
You did well today, actually.
Yeah, I know. So we've had, I tried. That's karma yoga. That's awareness in the real time. I'm aware that I talk too much because, particularly when I get excited. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity for giving me to speak.
Well, I would love to invite you once more again in the future sometime. Would you be willing to come back, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. We could have a full conversation about Seva and Bhakti and get all deeper into the Vedanta. That would be nice.
Yes. It would be lovely to talk about the lifestyle, lifestyle aspect of senior yoga teachers, that have an actual business going on and teach yoga for a living and all that. So I think it'll be a nice topic to let people on. Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating topic, to how yogis live in their life, how they manage work, teaching yoga for money, etc., particularly for newer yoga teachers, to get a sense of that work-life balance, managing money and managing your own personal ambitions and inner harmony and your sadhana. There's so many things to attend to, but we'll leave that for another day. Yeah.
Yes. Well, tribe, hope you got your answers today. Let's keep the conversation going. So do leave your comments and ideas and feedback in the description, in the comments below. Use Mark's details to connect with him. And for more expert podcasts, join us next time. And thank you very much for being here and watching our channel. Thanks. See you next episode.
Thank you. Hariom. Bye-bye.
Hariom.